I knew something was in the barn the moment I heard it whisper my name, except no one alive knew I was there. I froze mid-step, my hand still gripping the rusted latch of the barn door, the cold cutting straight through my gloves as that voice drifted out from the darkness. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even trying to scare me. It whispered my name the way someone whispers to a sleeping child. Gentle, close, and too familiar. For a second I thought I imagined it. The winter wind was slicing across the farm, slipping through every crack in the old boards. Maybe it was just the breeze curling around the nails and loose planks. Maybe it was just my mind messing with me after working all day on no sleep. But then it whispered again. Clearer this time, slower, almost smiling. Come in. My chest tightened so hard I thought I'd crack a rib. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't wind. It wasn't human. Whatever said those words was inside the barn, where no one should have been. The place had been locked for weeks. I was the only one with a key. And no one, absolutely no one, knew I was walking out there at 2 a.m. The snow behind me was untouched. The path from the house was silent. Even the animals were quiet, which was wrong. Cows and horses always made some noise at night. But tonight? Nothing. The silence felt staged, like everything around me was holding its breath. My heartbeat was the only sound I could hear now, thudding so loud it vibrated in my ears. I stepped back from the door, but the old wooden latch creaked on its own, as if something inside pushed against it gently. Tap, tap. Soft footsteps padded right up to the other side of the door. Not heavy, not dragging, childlike, then breathing. Slow, wet, right behind the wood. I stumbled backward, my boots slipping on the ice as snow dust scattered under my heels. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs refused to move. It felt like the cold air itself was gripping me, holding me in place, tightening around my ribs like invisible hands. And then something reached the bottom crack of the barn door. A shadow. Thin fingers. Too many joints. Curling downward like a spider's legs testing the wind. The fingers dragged along the wood grain, tracing the outline of the door as if it already knew exactly where I was standing outside. It moved with precision. No searching, no uncertainty. It wasn't looking for me. It had already found me. When it whispered my name a third time, the voice wasn't calm anymore. It was hungry. And this time it came from behind me. I whipped around so fast I nearly fell, but there was nothing there. Just an open field of white snow stretching miles into the dark. No movement. No shapes. No footprints. But I could still feel breath on my neck. Hot. Damp. Like an animal leaning close enough to smell me. I ran. I don't remember deciding to run. My body just broke free and sprinted on instinct, pounding through the snow, slipping, choking on cold air, the house a blurry shape in the distance. Behind me, the barn door didn't just open. It burst. Something big, fast, and wrong tore into the snow after me, and the last thing I heard before reaching the porch was that same whisper. No longer gentle, no longer calling my name. Just laughing. I should start by saying I'm not the kind of person who scares easily. My name's Evan, I'm 27, and I've grown up around farms my entire life. My uncle's property, where all of this happened, is the kind of place people from the city romanticize. A big open field, a long gravel driveway that crunches under your boots, a white farmhouse with chipped paint that somehow makes it look even more charming, and a big old red barn that's been standing longer than any of us have been alive. I'd been staying there for a few days, helping my uncle with some repairs while he was out of town. The man trusts me with everything, his tools, his animals, his entire property, so I didn't think twice when he handed me the keys and told me I could stay there while he took a short trip to Montana. This wasn't new for me. I'd watched the place before. I'd slept in that same guest room dozens of times, and nothing strange had ever happened, not once. It was early evening, around 6:30 p.m., when this part of the story takes place. The sun was dropping behind the distant tree line, turning everything gold. The air still smelled faintly of hay, the kind that sticks to your clothes and your hair long after you've come inside. I remember feeling at ease, actually relaxed for the first time in weeks. No traffic, no city noise, just crickets starting their nightly chorus, and the occasional soft grunt from the cows in the pasture. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of leftover stew, scrolling on my phone, not really thinking about anything important. Life felt simple in that moment. Safe. Comfortable. The kind of peace city people pay a fortune to get for a weekend. After dinner, I stepped outside to check on the animals, since it was part of the routine my uncle had left for me. Feed the horses, close the chicken coop, make sure the barn doors were latched. Easy stuff. I'd done it 100 times. The sky was purple by then, fading to a deeper blue every second. Fireflies blinked in the tall grass. The wind was soft, warm. Everything felt normal. The barn looked the same as always, big, old, sturdy. Some of the paint had peeled off so much it almost looked like it was shedding, but it was still a beautiful structure in its own rugged way. I'd grown up playing hide and seek in there with my cousins, climbing the rafters like we owned the place. There were memories in every dusty corner. I wasn't in any hurry either. I moved slow, taking in the quiet, appreciating it. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have a place like this in my life, somewhere untouched by the chaos of everything else. I wasn't stressed. I wasn't worried. I wasn't even thinking about anything besides whether I should make coffee or hot chocolate later. The animals were calm too, which always helped set the mood. The horses were grazing lazily. The chickens were already dozing off in their coop. Even the old farm dog, Baxter, was sprawled on the porch in total bliss, twitching his paws as he dreamed. Absolutely nothing felt wrong. If anything, the world felt quieter than usual, like it was tucking itself in for the night. I didn't know it at the time, but that was the last moment of real uncomplicated peace I would have. Because within the hour, I'd realized something was inside that barn with me, and it had been waiting. I was about halfway across the yard when I first felt it. Not fear, not danger, just an interruption. A flicker in the atmosphere, like the air shifted by a fraction of a degree. It wasn't cold exactly, but something about the warmth felt different, like it wasn't settling naturally on my skin anymore. I stopped walking without really knowing why and glanced over my shoulder. Nothing. Just the quiet yard, the fading sky, and Baxter still sleeping on the porch. I told myself I was being dramatic. I'd been alone on the property for 2 days now. Maybe the silence was getting into my head a little. Out here, it's so quiet that even the smallest sounds feel bigger. But then I heard something faint behind the barn. A soft tap, like someone flicked a finger against wood. I froze. Not because it scared me, but because it was out of place. There shouldn't have been any movement behind the barn. The cows were fenced in on the other side of the field, the horses were to my right, and the chickens couldn't possibly get back there. Plus, Baxter always barked when anything wandered onto the property. Stray dog, raccoon, even a deer sometimes. But he didn't react. He didn't even lift his head. I stood there a moment longer listening. Nothing else followed. Just crickets, wind, the rustling trees. I shook my head, laughed at myself quietly, and kept walking, slow, steady, a little more alert than before. When I reached the barn door, I grabbed the wooden latch and pulled it open, expecting the usual. The warm, dusty smell of hay, the low groan of wood shifting, maybe a barn cat darting out. And I did get those things, but something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. The air inside the barn was strangely still. Not stale still. Like someone had sucked the movement out of it. I stepped inside and let the door creak shut behind me. My boots crunched against the straw-covered floor, echoing a little louder than they should have. I walked down the center aisle, checking the feed buckets just like always. Everything looked normal, but the feeling wouldn't leave. I kept glancing toward the shadows between the stalls, the loft ladder, the rafters above. Not because I saw anything, just because it felt like someone else was standing nearby. Watching. Standing just out of view, waiting for me to turn around at the wrong moment. At one point, I heard a soft rustle of hay in the far corner. Not loud. Just a tiny sound. Like something shifting its weight. Baxter. I called out, even though I knew damn well he never came inside the barn. Silence. Heavy, expectant silence. I walked toward the sound, each step echoing deeper into the hollow space. When I got close enough, I nudged the pile of hay with my boot. Nothing came scurrying out. No animals, no critters, no movement. Still, the hair on my arms was standing straight up. I backed away slowly, feeling ridiculous for letting small sounds get to me. But as I turned toward the entrance again, I noticed something subtle. Barely noticeable unless you were really paying attention. The barn door was slightly more open than when I'd walked in. Maybe the wind did it. Maybe I didn't latch it right. But the breeze outside wasn't strong enough to move a heavy wooden door like that. And I knew I'd pushed it closed all the way. I swallowed hard and walked toward it, telling myself I was overthinking everything. Still, every step felt heavier, like I was pushing through something invisible, an atmosphere that had thickened without warning. When I reached the doorway, I paused again. The yard was quiet, too quiet. Even the crickets had stopped. I didn't see anything out there. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. But for the first time, I felt certain I was not alone on that property. And whatever else was out there, it knew I had noticed. I was standing in the barn doorway, staring out into the unervingly still yard, when everything changed. It happened fast, so fast that for a split second my mind refused to process it. A shadow moved. Not in the way a person moves. Not in the way an animal moves. It slid. Long, stretched, and completely silent, gliding across the snow-dusted ground outside the barn, just beyond the fence line. At first, I thought it was a trick of the fading light, maybe the wind pushing tree branches. But the trees weren't moving. The air was dead still. And the shape wasn't bending or flickering like a shadow should. It moved with intention. And it was watching me. I felt it before I fully saw it. A weight dropped onto my chest, cold, crushing, suffocating. The same kind of pressure you feel when you wake from a nightmare and can't breathe. That's when my instincts finally kicked in. I stepped quickly back inside and grabbed the barn door, ready to slam it shut. But then the sound hit. A low, vibrating groan, deep enough that I felt it inside my ribs before I heard it in my ears. It came from the far end of the barn, echoing through the rafters like the building itself was exhaling. I spun around. Something was in the barn with me. My eyes scanned the dim interior, the stalls, the loft, the shadows pooling in the corners. Nothing moved. Nothing looked out of place. But the air, it had become heavy, thick, as if the entire room dropped 10 degrees in a heartbeat. And then I heard it again. Not the groan this time. Something smaller. A slow, deliberate footstep in the straw. Crunch. I backed away, my heartbeat slamming through my ears. "Hello," I called out, though I instantly regretted saying anything. My voice sounded tiny, swallowed by the hollow dark. Crunch. Another step. Closer. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. The barn played tricks with sound. Every noise bounced off the walls before falling somewhere behind me. It felt like the footsteps were circling me even though I saw nothing. Then something brushed the back of my neck. Just a whisper of movement, cold, damp, and impossibly real. I jerked forward, spinning so fast I nearly slipped on the straw. The aisle behind me was empty. Completely empty. But the footsteps, they didn't stop. Crunch. 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 Coming down the aisle from the stalls. I stared into the dim corridor, and for a moment, I didn't understand what I was seeing. The shape was wrong. Too tall. Too thin. Its limbs didn't move like they belonged to a body. They moved more like joints that had been bent the wrong way and forced to walk. Its head, God. Its head wasn't shaped like any animal or person I had ever seen. Too narrow, too stretched forward. Like something trying to imitate a face but failing miserably. When it stepped into the weak sliver of light from the window, I saw its skin. Pale. Grayish. Damp-looking. Like it had crawled out of the ground minutes ago. Its eyes, if they were eyes, were just deep, empty pits that reflected nothing. I stumbled backward so fast I hit a stall door behind me. The thing tilted its head, studying me with this eerie, unnatural stillness. No breathing. No sound. No movement besides those awful, inverted limbs shifting beneath it. Something primal in me screamed, "Run!" The creature took one step forward, and every sense in my body lit on fire. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't a trick of the shadows. It was real. It was inside the barn with me, and it had been hiding there long before I walked in. The barn door, half open behind me, suddenly slammed shut on its own. Not from wind. From force. The creature lunged. The instant the creature lunged, instinct took control. I didn't think, I just moved. I threw myself sideways, hitting the ground hard enough to knock the breath from my lungs. Something sharp, one of its twisted limbs, slashed through the air where my chest had been a second earlier, ripping deep into the wooden wall behind me with a sound like tearing metal. I scrambled up, boots slipping on the scattered straw, adrenaline burning through every nerve. I didn't dare look back. I could hear it, those grotesque limbs scraping against the floor, that wet, dragging sound like something pulling itself across cold earth. I sprinted down the aisle toward the back of the barn, my hands brushing against stall doors as I ran. One of them rattled violently. For a split second I thought an animal inside was panicking, but then I realized it wasn't the animal shaking the stall. It was the creature striking the other side of the wooden boards, following me from the opposite aisle. It was trying to cut me off. Move, move, move. I screamed to myself. A sharp crash exploded behind me, followed by a splintering crack. I didn't need to turn around. I could feel the vibration through the ground. The thing had leapt over the stalls, crashing onto the beams above like some kind of twisted spider. The loft creaked under its weight. Then it started crawling overhead. Fast. Too fast. Dust rained from the rafters as its limbs scraped the wood. I ducked, covering my head, and sprinted toward the small service door in the back of the barn. I could hear it tracking my movement, its weight shifting along the beams with unnatural speed. A loud thump hit directly above me. I dove forward, just in time. A long, jagged limb punched straight through the ceiling, stabbing into the ground where my head had been a heartbeat earlier. My scream tore itself out of me. I grabbed the service door latch frozen shut. My fingers slipped on the metal as I yanked and slammed my shoulder against it. The creature hissed, no, not a hiss. A sound like wet lungs forcing out air after being full of mud. It dropped from the beams. The impact shook straw loose from the rafters. I didn't turn around. I slammed the door again, and this time the rusted latch snapped. The door burst open, freezing cold slamming into me like a slap. I stumbled out into the snow. The moonlit yard stretched in front of me. Empty. Silent. For one heartbeat I felt hope. Then the barn door behind me exploded outward. I didn't look back, I just ran. Snow kicked up behind me as my boots pounded the frozen ground. Every step felt like I was running through glue, my limbs heavy with terror. The cold stabbed at my lungs, but the sound behind me was worse. That scraping. Those jagged limbs dragging through snow as it barreled after me. It was fast. Too fast. I veered toward the fence, nearly slipping. My fingers clawed at the icy wooden rails, hauling myself over. Just as I dropped down the other side, one of its limbs whipped across the top rail, carving a deep, fresh gouge inches from my hand. It shrieked, a horrible broken wail. Half animal, half human, all wrong. I sprinted toward the tree line. My legs burned. My breath tore. The world narrowed into nothing but the sound of my heartbeat and the crunch of snow beneath my feet. Branches whipped my face as I entered the woods. I ducked behind a thick pine, pressing my back against the bark, trying to quiet my breathing. The creature crashed into the trees seconds later. I could hear it sniffing, dragging, prowling. Snow shifted softly as it moved through the darkness, searching. I clamped my hands over my mouth, trembling so hard the bark vibrated against my spine. It stopped. Right on the other side of the tree. Silence. Then, a sound I will never forget. A slow, deliberate inhale. It was smelling me. I bolted. Branches snapped. Snow exploded around me. The woods became a blur of white and black streaks as the creature tore after me, ripping through underbrush like paper. I saw a fallen log ahead and dove behind it, rolling into a shallow ditch. I pressed myself into the icy mud, forcing my shaking body to stay still. The creature rushed past, too fast to stop. It barreled deeper into the woods, its screech fading with distance. For a moment, just a moment, I was safe. But I didn't dare move. Because the woods had gone silent again. And silence out here meant it was listening. Somewhere out there, it realized I hadn't run far. And it turned back. The hunt wasn't over. I stayed hidden in that ditch for what felt like hours, though it was probably no more than 20 minutes. My body was shaking so violently from fear and cold that even the mud beneath me trembled. Every bone in my body screamed to run, but I knew running blindly in the woods, especially with that thing still nearby, would only get me killed. So I waited. Eventually, the creature's sounds faded. No more scraping. No more wheezing breaths. No more weight shifting through the trees. The forest returned to that dead stillness that had unnerved me earlier. Except now it felt like a blanket I was terrified to leave. Still, I had no choice. The cold was sinking into my bones, numbing my fingers, stiffening my legs. If the creature didn't find me, the freezing night would. So I forced myself up, using the fallen log to steady my shaking body, and climbed out of the ditch. Every sound, even the soft crunch of my own boots, felt too loud. I didn't go back toward the barn. I didn't even look in its direction. I knew exactly what waited inside. And I wasn't going to gamble my life by confirming it was gone. Instead, I cut through the woods, following the dim silver glow of moonlight on the snow until the outline of my cousin's cabin appeared through the trees. It looked warm, safe, normal. But after what I'd seen in the barn, I didn't trust normal anymore. Still, I forced myself to cross the yard and rush up the porch steps. My hand shook so badly that it took me 3 tries to shove the key into the lock. When I pushed the door open and stumbled inside, a wave of warm air hit me. It should have been comforting. It wasn't. It felt like stepping into someone else's house. I locked the door. Then I locked the deadbolt. Then I slid the chain across. Then I shoved a chair beneath the handle. Still didn't feel like enough. I collapsed onto the floor, my breath finally leaving my lungs in a sharp, painful rush. For a few minutes I just sat there, staring at the door, waiting for something to slam against it. Nothing did. Eventually, I pulled myself together and crawled over to the window. Slowly, I lifted the edge of the curtain and looked outside. Snow. Empty yard. Pitch-black tree line. Nothing moved. It should have made me feel better. It didn't. Something about the stillness out there made my skin crawl, as if the night itself was holding its breath. I stayed awake until sunrise, curled up in a blanket on the floor with every light in the cabin turned on. When morning finally came, I gathered what little courage I had left and called my cousin. I didn't tell him what I saw in the barn, just that something attacked me and the place didn't feel safe. He drove up within 2 hours. By the time he arrived, I had talked myself into believing maybe I imagined parts of it. Maybe shock, darkness, and fear twisted something ordinary into something monstrous. But that hope shattered the moment my cousin opened the barn door. Everything looked normal. The stalls were intact. The rafters were clean. The service door latch wasn't broken. The gouges, the claw marks, the splintered wood, all of it was gone. Like nothing ever happened. He looked at me with concern like he was trying to decide if I'd had some kind of breakdown. But then he pointed toward the center of the barn floor. A single footprint. Huge. Deep. Not shaped like any animal he'd ever seen. And it was facing the cabin. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. Because right then my cousin brushed some of the straw aside with his boot, revealing a trail of faint prints beneath it, leading out of the barn, across the yard, into the woods, all the way to the porch, to the front door I had locked. My stomach turned to ice. One of the prints, just one, was pressed deeper than the rest, as if something stood there for a long, long time, watching, listening, waiting. My cousin didn't notice, but I did. And every night since, I swear I still hear it sometimes. A slow, deliberate inhale. Right outside my window,